Hi Whovians, Harry here, and welcome to my review of the second episode of the new series of Doctor Who, the episode The Devil's Chord. And again, apologies that this review is coming out late, but there has just been so much going on in my life. I talked about it a little bit more in my Space Babies review, so go watch that one if you haven't already. But this video is going to be going over my review of the second episode of Season 1 of Doctor Who, The Devil's Chord. But before we get into that, don't forget to subscribe, also leave a like and comment down below, and let's get in to the video. So this week it was a double bill to open up this series. It was Space Babies followed by The Devil's Chord to kind of just launch the series, get everyone interested. And I actually preferred The Devil's Chord to Space Babies. I've seen sides like for the argument that Space Babies was better and emphasise that The Devil's Chord was better. But just in my personal opinion, I felt The Devil's Chord was better. And before we get any further, of course, spoiler warning if you haven't somehow watched The Devil's Chord yet. So if you haven't yet, go watch it and then come back. But moving into the actual episode, we get a cold open this time. We didn't get it for Space Babies, but I thought that was just because it was the first episode of a new series, so we're now getting back to normality. And the cold open follows a Timothy Drake, who is put forward as a musical genius, and he accidentally unleashes the villain of this episode, Maestro, which by playing the Devil's Chord, because a boy called Henry Arbinger tricked him into playing it, and by playing it, it releases Maestro. And then Maestro reveals that it was a part of their plan to use Henry Arbinger to obviously help Maestro get released, because Henry Arbinger is actually a harbinger, which is a prelude to Maestro. So when Maestro comes face to face with Timothy Drake, they steal the music from him, and this kind of sets the events of this episode in motion, because it means that the future from 1925, which is when this cold open takes place, from that future, there is only simple, boring, like bland music left to play in the future, which is, of course, the main plot of the Doctor and Ruby trying to instill music back into the future. And then as we move on past that, into the title sequence, Maestro plays the Doctor Who theme song. Which is just so cool, and as a Pokemon fan, there is something about a piano theme which is, yes, something bad is going to happen. And, of course, Maestro is a big villain in this episode. So, the Doctor and Ruby just enter this episode just because they wanted to go and see the Beatles. And they obviously, so they meet the Beatles and they find out that music has, like, gone wrong and, like, the past has gone wrong and music is disappearing. And when they go forward into the future, again, London has become just an apocalyptic land site. But moving on past that, they go back to 1963 and they defeat Maestro with the help of John Lennon and Paul McCartney, and then they have a little weird musical number at the end, and that's just the general plot of it. However, I do want to go into some specifics of this episode. So, I mentioned 1963, and 1963 is, of course, a big year for Doctor Who, because it is the year that Doctor Who, of course, first aired. And through this, there is even more hints to the first episode of Doctor Who, because the Doctor explains to Ruby that he actually, like, literally points it out to her that he was living in a scrapyard at this point in time, and that he has or had a granddaughter called Susan, and that he has had kids before, or he will have kids. Time travel gets complicated, as the Doctor says, and basically he also describes either the Time War or the Master's destruction of Gallifrey at some point between Series 11 and Series 12, because he says that Susan could have been wiped out during one of the apocalyptic events on Gallifrey. So maybe Susan is still out there. If she is, I'd like to see her. I mean, it just feels like they're leading more into a potential return of Carol Lanford as Susan Foreman. But I don't know, maybe not. But the Doctor and Ruby just seem to be having like such a fun time in this episode when they're not, obviously, when the Doctor isn't reminiscing on his time in his past lives, or when he's not, of course, battling the Maestro. Because just when they exit the TARDIS for the first time to go and see the Beatles before they realise that everything is wrong, the Doctor and Ruby recreate the Abbey Road title cover from, of course, the Beatles Abbey Road cover, and it's just fun to see that happen. And of course, Doctor Who has already recreated the Beatles Abbey Road cover in past promotional things for Doctor Who, but it's nice to see them just be fun and light. Again, I do feel like their friendship has come pretty thick and fast, and it hasn't had any there hasn't been any tension between the two, but maybe we'll get that to come later. And I don't feel like Ruby really has had a chance to shine, but I think we will get that in Boom, because the Doctor is stuck in a landmine, so Ruby will probably have to do their heavy lifting for that moment. And we do get just some fun moments, and it's fun and lighthearted, a bit like Space Babies, so it makes sense why maybe these two were the first episode before we get a bit of more of a tonal shift for Boom. However, it isn't all just fun in this episode, because there are a couple of weird things. The first one is when the Doctor and Ruby decide to travel to present-day London. The Doctor asks Ruby what time it is for her, and Ruby says that the present day is June 2024. However, she started travelling with the Doctor Christmas Eve 2023, and in the last episode, Space Babies, they went back to that Christmas Eve of 2023. So how is it already in the second episode, June 2024? That is a gap of 6 months. Are we expected to think that Ruby has been travelling with the Doctor for 6 months and we haven't seen anything until now? I would be fine with Ruby travelling for the Doctor for even a month and us not seeing it. However, 6 months in the space of not even one episode, the in-between of episode 1 and episode 2, which, not to mention, for us, were back to back. And it just feels weird and off. Maybe this will factor into the fourth wall breaking and the breakdown of maybe Doctor Who, like all the characters then realise that they're in a TV show, but it just feels weird. But of course, I can't go through this episode without talking about the villain of The Devil's Chord, of course being Maestro. Now, Maestro is a powerful villain, and that is just seen in the Doctor's reaction to the fact that he knows that this is part of the Toymaker's legions. Because when Maestro emerges after the Doctor and Ruby try to bring music back to London and back to the world, Maestro emerges from the piano, and the giggle plays when they appear. And the Doctor realises that this is the giggle, that Maestro is part of the Toymaker's legions, and how it and he actually mentions in the episode how it tore him apart, tore him in two, just defeating the Toymaker, and that he only got lucky, and it is unlikely that he is going to beat Maestro. However, he does have one trick up his sleeve, and the Doctor uses his sonic to silence Maestro and basically everything around them. However, it doesn't work for long, and Maestro shows just how powerful they are by managing to break through the Doctor's sonic and make music and sound again. And when Maestro disappears and Ruby goes, oh well, you can just stop Maestro again by using the sonic to silence them, the Doctor says it only works for once, and you only get one trick with all the gods. However, we have seen aliens work, only one trick works with them in the past of Doctor Who, like the Carrier Knights. The Doctor said to Martha that the magic of the name only works once. And the Carrier Knights were technically aliens, not gods or witches. So maybe these pantheon of gods that Russell is referring to are actually not really gods, but aliens that are godlike status and the Doctor doesn't know about. However, we quickly then get confirmation that Maestro was part of the Toymaker's legions. And really, the Toymaker kind of only released his legions out of spite, really, because Maestro hates the Toymaker. Even though the Toymaker is kind of like Maestro's dad, they didn't get along, and he kind of only released her because he was totally defeated. There wasn't any chance of him coming back, so he's just kind of released his legions to make the Doctor's life as difficult as possible, which is just really petty and something I can imagine the Toymaker doing, because he is a literal child who his only joy is to beat people at games. And just like the Toymaker was really petty and he just wanted to play games, the Maestro is just toying with the Doctor as well. They have a whole musical number where you know that they are just delightfully toying with the Doctor because they're just having so much fun. So the Doctor and Ruby manage to escape Maestro from the apocalyptic future, and they go back to 1963, and the Doctor is like, okay, there's some notes that Maestro was released with, because Maestro had to tell him, because Maestro, like the Toymaker, has to play by the rules of the game, so she had to tell the Doctor why, how they were released, and the Doctor is like, oh, so there's some musical notes to release Maestro, and there will be some musical notes to, take her back, so that that they will be, they won't be allowed in the universe again. And the Doctor starts playing, and Ruby gets taken by Maestro because Maestro can just step from one time to another like the Doctor. And he hears some music playing, and this is big because the Doctor mentions that he always thought this music was diegetic, meaning that he shouldn't be able to hear it, that only the audience would be able to hear it, because it is playing from the editing, they've added it in post-production, but he can hear the music. And then when he catches up with Maestro, she has Ruby bound in music, and when Maestro tries to take music from Ruby, it is revealed that Ruby has a song in her, and it is the song that was playing when she was abandoned in the church on Ruby Road, meaning that we have to come back to that time on the church on Ruby Road, because, with the snow falling, in this scene there is snow falling, it is definitely working up to us coming back to that point when Ruby was abandoned in the church on Ruby Road. And what's even bigger is that Maestro is freaked out by this, and she says, the old one? Was he there? What was he doing there? and she seems like kind of like freaked out by this. Like the old one is obviously someone that is above the toy maker and Maestro, and has something to do with Ruby's Ruby's past, Ruby's mother, and like Ruby being abandoned. And like, was he there? And there have been lots of thoughts, like, could it be Sutek? Could it be the trickster? Could they have been the ones like abandoning Ruby, not it being Ruby's mother? There's just so much going on, but we will definitely get the old one if we revisit the church on Ruby Road when Ruby was abandoned. And then, of course, with all of that out the way, the Doctor tries to defeat Maestro. However, he can't come up with the right chords, and Maestro manages to shut Ruby in a violin and the Doctor in a drum, and she kicks the piano out of the room. However, she didn't count on the return of John Lennon and Paul McCartney, because they come across this piano, and throughout this episode they have felt there's something missing, felt there's some music inside them, and they've finally managed to let it out and find the correct music notes to banish Maestro. And if you're wondering why it's just John Lennon and Paul McCartney, it's just those two are the ones that wrote the Beatle music, the other two didn't, so that's why it's just John Lennon and Paul McCartney. But they managed to defeat Maestro, and as she's being defeated, the Doctor and Ruby burst out of the instruments they were trapped in. Maestro says, "The one that waits is almost here," which is of course what the Toymaker brought up the first time in the giggle, and the Toymaker was scared of it, so Maestro must be scared of the one that waits too. So that is big, because if we have the old one and the one that waits, the Doctor is in for a bad time, since he didn't even defeat Maestro. It was just luck again that Maestro was defeated. And what's even worse is that the TARDIS had malfunctioned for a second in this episode, and the Doctor said that Maestro hadn't caused it to malfunction. So he has to take on the oldest one and the one that waits with a malfunctioning TARDIS, because we have seen in footage for the rest of this season that the TARDIS, something is going wrong with it. So the Doctor is in massive trouble. However, then we just get a bit of fun, because the episode ends with the Doctor breaking the fourth wall and there being a musical, and it's just funny and campy and just fun, and it is called There's Always a Twist at the End, which is probably referencing the character Susan Twist, who appeared in this episode as a tea lady, and she has now appeared in 4 episodes, and I predict she will probably appear in maybe every episode this season. But that is not it for cameos and people in this episode, because there is also a quick cameo by Murray Gold, composer for Doctor Who, and he deserves a cameo in this episode because there was a lot of music. He had a lot to do. So it's great that he gets a small cameo in this, and it's just great to see Murray Gold back. Love his music. And also, again, there is one more, and that is that during this song, Henry Arbinger can be seen, and that is the person that was the prelude to Maestro coming into this reality. So why is he there? And what does this mean for the Doctor? Will he also announce the old one or the one who waits? I think the Doctor might be in trouble. So that episode was crazy. There was just so much going on. There's like real tense stuff with Maestro, and then there's just campy fun with the musical at the end. I think this episode was amazing. I think I would give The Devil's Chord an 8 out of 10. I was toying whether to give it a 9, but I'm not sure whether it is at that level, because there are just some weird things. It sets up a lot of stuff that needs to be resolved by at least season 2, and I'm not sure whether Russell can do it like tie it up neatly. But as this episode, just standalone, it is really good. I hope we don't see like musicals every episode. I would be open to maybe another one, like next series. I don't want another one this series, but it was just, for it to be just this episode, it was just fun. And I thought this episode was amazing. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. What did you think of this episode? And also, if you like this video, don't forget to leave a like, also subscribe, and share it out. I will see you in the next one.